it, Daddy?
Honey, I'm not the weatherman. Why don't you take Billy, get him dressed? I'll take him to town with me. Meet you guys in there. Hold hands.
Damage at the school, wouldn't you know?
Look, I told you all leaves are canceled. I don't know why.
Something in the mist took John Lee!
And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God.
End time has come, not in flames, but in mist. Read the good book. It calls for expiation.
I don't like that scary lady.
I don't either. But you know what? Maybe she's scared too.
It's death.
Fuck! Get it off! Get it off! Get this freaking thing off me! It's awful. It's awful. Let's go! What? On! Myron!
Frank Darabont's The Mist is a stark, unforgiving moral fable about the collapse of human order when the world stops making sense. While it wears the skin of a creature feature, beneath the surface beats the black heart of a story about fear, fanaticism, and how thin the barrier between civilization and chaos truly is. Adapted from Stephen King's 1980 novella of the same name, it is at once faithful to the spirit of its source material and radically bold in its execution with a few deviations. Where King ends on uncertainty and possibility, Darabont opts for absolute devastation, an ending so bleak that it seems to be all people remember about the film. The story begins simply enough. After a violent thunderstorm ravages the town of Bridgton, Maine, artist David Drayton and his young son Billy head to the supermarket for supplies with their neighbour Norton. But as they, along with others, find themselves trapped in the store, a thick, unnatural mist descends upon the town. What begins as an atmospheric anomaly quickly morphs into a full-blown siege by otherworldly creatures. As panic escalates and paranoia spreads, the group must grapple not only with the threats outside, but with the ideological schisms forming within. The novella is often read as a claustrophobic survival tale laced with Lovecraftian horror, but within its fog-choked surface lies a critical node in the vast network of King's interconnected multiverse. While the story itself is intimate in scope, it is profoundly important in terms of how it reflects, mirrors, and participates in the greater mythos King has been building across his body of work. In The Mist, the existential dread of the unknown becomes literalized, embodied in monstrous forms that leak through a rupture in space-time. Though short in length, it offers some of the most potent metaphysical imagery and cosmic implications found in any of his books. Hey guys, what's happening? Niat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we're breaking down the creatures of the mist and some theories on where they come from, exploring the production history, the story, characters, as well as explaining the ending. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification icon to stay up to date on all the latest content, and click the like button to help appease the algorithm gods. Also, if you'd like to make a suggestion on what you want me to cover next, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments below.
From earliest recollection, from earliest memory, the things that attracted me the most had robots and spaceships and monsters and flying saucers. What I call the literature or the cinema of the fantastic. I would seek this stuff out. I was just drawn to it. I always loved the metaphors that kind of storytelling could provide. But why? It just is.
Okay, I gotta get serious, sorry.
The phantasmal horrors of the mist are, to borrow from Lovecraftian tradition, apex specimens of another dimension's natural order. They are predators, scavengers, parasites, and titans of a biosphere that operates by the rules of a foreign ecosystem. Each creature that emerges through the veil is not a random monstrosity, but an evolutionary success story from its own world. And it is in studying their forms and functions that we can glimpse the logic of the place they call home. The first creature we see defies classification. Tentacled, limber, and seemingly boneless, it glides across surfaces and strikes with precision. This creature, call it the tentacled horror, appears to lack a skeletal structure, relying instead on hydraulic musculature and radical symmetry.
Shit! Oh, shit!
The suckers along its appendages suggest predatory behavior, barbed to puncture flesh, drag bodies, or latch onto prey. What's striking is its almost cephalopod-like logic. This is a creature built for pressurized environments with fine-tuned spatial awareness, able to manipulate tools or open objects, traits often linked to intelligence. It's not just a hunter, it's a problem solver. Not long after, we witness another genus, chitinous winged and insectoid. These scorpion flies, also referred to as bloodwing, seem to represent a mid-tier species, somewhere between parasite and nuisance. They bear oversized thoraxes, stingers capable of piercing flesh, and massive abdomens. They are attracted to light, and their buzzing swarms indicate hive behavior, possibly pheromone-based, while their stingers cause rapid necrosis, implying a biochemical venom evolved to immobilize prey much larger than themselves. Whether they evolved this as defense against titanic predators or as a form of biochemical warfare in mating contests is unknown, but the stinger's potency is not accidental. This is an evolved weapon. Hunting, the scorpion flies are larger, bat-like beasts called terror buzzards. Their biology is utterly unnatural. Instead of true bone, they possess cartilage-based skeletons reinforced with silicon or keratin. They hover and dart with grace, suggesting either lighter gravity in their home dimension or ambient electromagnetic fields that their biology can exploit. Their heads are armored, their beaks serrated, and their eyes black, expressionless voids. They are not scavengers, they are apex aerial hunters, capable of breaking through glass, hunting, and showing a level of spatial coordination bordering on tactical. Later comes something altogether more terrifying. The Grey Widowers, perhaps the most nightmarishly plausible of the mist entities. Large, long-limbed arachnids with calcified exoskeletons and acidic silk glands, they are not just hunters but ecosystem enforcers. They don't merely trap prey, they liquefy them. Their silk behaves like biocorrosive resin, capable of dissolving both flesh and bone. Their reproductive cycle appears parasitic, implanting eggs inside living hosts. This speaks to a realm where death is just one part of a more horrific life cycle. Their vision, if they see at all, must rely on thermal signatures or vibration, again indicating a world steeped in fog, dark, or layered frequencies beyond human perception. And then there is the truly grotesque, the arachne lobster, a thing of claws, chitin, and brute violence. Massive, armored, and blindly aggressive, it resembles a monstrous fusion of crab and mantis shrimp. Its movement is all piston-driven force, and its claws sever human bodies with surgical efficiency. The sheer armor plating of its exoskeleton suggests either a world populated with even larger predators, or an environment so hostile that only creatures with biological armor can survive. It lacks finesse, but makes up for it in shock and awe, a living bulldozer of carnivorous instinct. But towering above them all, literally, is the behemoth, or what many refer to as the tentacled leviathan glimpsed in silhouette. This creature seems impossibly fast, hundreds of feet tall, with legs like cathedral columns. It is the clearest example of how wrong the rules of their world are. Nothing that size should move with such elegance, and yet it does. Perhaps it is not biological at all in the conventional sense, but an ecosystem in and of itself, like a mobile coral reef, a floating biome, a Lovecraftian god that doesn't notice anything beneath its feet. All of these creatures share one thing in common: disconnection from Earth's physical laws. Their anatomies betray a universe where gravity is weaker, where biochemistry is governed not by carbon and oxygen, but by stranger elements, where evolution did not reward mammals or photosynthesis, but chitin, armor, acid, and brute force. Their senses are built for frequencies and emissions that may not even exist in our reality. Their movement patterns suggest different gravitational ratios, their skins do not sweat, their eyes do not blink. They are not alien in the traditional sense, they are foreign in the existential one. They come from an ecology shaped by an alien atmosphere, by alien chemistry, by gravity fields that may swirl and twist rather than pull, a dimension where light is rare, noise is rapacious, and perhaps even time does not flow in one direction. And that dimension, it bears the fingerprints of a familiar horror for readers of Stephen King. In his sprawling multiverse, King introduces the concept of Todash space, a void that exists between worlds, an inky nothingness writhing with ancient, hungry things. It is not so much a place as it is an absence, an anti-space. King describes Todash as home to formless predators who drift in sensory silence, waiting to slip through thinnies, natural weak spots in the fabric of reality. The mist, quite plausibly, is the breath of Todash space, pushing through a man-made rip in the walls of our world. These creatures slip through, unaware of where they are, but driven by instinct. They do not hate us, they simply consume, as they always have. This hypothesis aligns well with other entries in King's canon. In From a Buick 8, another portal-like anomaly unleashes misshapen creatures into our world, strange, limp-limbed things that don't quite fit the geometry of Earth. In The Dark Tower, Todash space is crossed by Roland and his quartet, where they glimpse things vast and wrong floating in the void. In it, the titular monster is itself an extra-dimensional predator, hailing from the macroverse, an older reality that brushes against ours like a shark skimming past a diver's cage. Each of these examples supports the idea that King's horror does not emerge from our world going wrong, but from other worlds colliding with it. His most terrifying monsters are not native to Earth, but visitors, ancient, unknowable, and driven by imperatives alien to human comprehension. The monsters of the Mist are among the clearest illustrations of this principle. In that way, the Mist is one of King's purest expressions of cosmic horror.
Really, one of the key things that drove the whole design phase for this movie was they're just animals that just happen to have been displaced from wherever they live.
Nicotero and I really wanted to give you, the viewer, the fanciful Stephen King idea of these monsters, but we also wanted to do it in such a way that they felt like they could be real creatures from a real ecosystem.
The journey to adapt the Mist to the screen was as murky and unpredictable as the supernatural haze that eventually chokes the small Maine town. Though the novella had long been considered one of Stephen King's most cinematic short stories, the film's production was marked by creative delays, shifting studios and a director determined to retain the story's dread-inducing themes without losing its emotional core. The 2007 adaptation, written and directed by Frank Darabont, ultimately emerged as a striking, emotionally devastating film, one that continues to polarize audiences while remaining one of the most daring interpretations of King's work. Darabont had a long-standing relationship with Stephen King that stretched back decades. After penning The Woman in the Room, a short film based on one of King's lesser-known stories as a calling card, he established himself as a King whisperer of sorts. He later directed The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, two of the most acclaimed King adaptations of all time. But even before those Oscar-nominated successes, Darabont had been eyeing The Mist. He secured the adaptation rights after the novella was published as part of Skeleton Crew. However, while The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile were prestige period dramas with strong humanistic themes, The Mist was a different beast, grittier, leaner, and nihilistic. For years, Darabont struggled to find the right moment and studio backing to bring the story to life. Studios were wary of its bleakness, especially the ending he envisioned. Darabont refused to compromise, and as a result, the project languished in limbo for years. Even with 2 successful King films under his belt, The Mist was seen as too dark and uncommercial. Nevertheless, he kept the idea in his back pocket, but it would take nearly 2 decades for the fog to finally roll in.
I don't think either of us really knew how to end it for a long time. We talked about that. We kicked it back and forth. The story has no ending. And Frank finally came up with an ending. And once the ending was there, before, when we were getting ready to do this, you know, and Bob and Harvey Weinstein came into the room.
Yeah.
They say this about the ending, say that about the ending. And I'm thinking, I hope people realize that there's like 2 hours before the ending.
You're right, exactly.
Yeah.
And a damn
but they will talk about
ride along the way.
Yeah.
Thanks to you, rich material.
When Darabont sat down to finalize the screenplay, he approached the story with deep reverence, but also a clear understanding of how cinematic language would shape the experience. King's novella, written in a first-person stream of consciousness style from David Drayton's perspective, relies heavily on internal monologue and suggestion. Much of its horror comes not from outright gore or monster reveals, but from the character's psychological deterioration and the unknowable nature of the mist itself. His adaptation, therefore, had to translate those inner turmoils into visual tension and interpersonal drama. One of Darabont's most controversial choices was his revision of the ending. In King's version, the story concludes ambiguously. David and a few survivors drive into the mist, unsure of what lies ahead, with the faint hope that rescue or ruin might await them. Darabont, however, wanted to make a sharper, crueler point about hopelessness, fear, and the fragility of human resolve. His ending, now infamous as David killing his fellow survivors, including his son, only to be rescued by the military seconds later. He reportedly pitched this ending directly to King, expecting backlash. Instead, King loved it, calling it the ending that he wished he had written.
I mean, it's a movie about fear sending people off a precipice, and it just felt intuitive to me, and I'm really glad that you agreed and felt it was true to the story.
Is it true that you extracted a promise from the studio that they wouldn't change the ending?
Oh, absolutely. When Bob called me and said, I love this script, I'd love to make this movie, I got on a plane, I flew to New York, and this is the first time I ever met him. I sat in a room with him and I said, Bob, you have to understand.
The ending is not negotiable.
Exactly. And if I were willing to change the ending, I'd be making this movie for over twice the budget that you're talking about. I will come and make this movie for you at Dimension for the amount of money that you're talking about, as long as the script is sacrosanct. And he was cool with that, and he's the only guy who had the balls to say, okay, let's do it.
But the ending is far from the only change. One of the more notable omissions from the novella is the subplot involving David Drayton and Amanda Dumfries. In the novel, the two engage in a brief affair, born of fear and loneliness while trapped inside the supermarket. It's a complicated moment, emotional, morally grey, and emblematic of how trauma can collapse ethical boundaries. Darabont chose to omit this in the film, portraying their relationship as one of mutual support and emotional connection rather than physical intimacy. The decision strips out the adultery angle and recasts David in a more sympathetic light, allowing audiences to stay aligned with his moral center, especially given where the film eventually leads him. Character shifts were also key. Ollie Weeks, the assistant manager in the novella, is given a more pronounced heroic arc in the film, complete with a memorably stoic demeanor and surprising firearm prowess. Marcia Gay Harden's Mrs. Carmody is far more unhinged in the film, evolving into a cult leader whose rhetoric becomes increasingly violent and apocalyptic. While Carmody is certainly dangerous in the novella, Darabont's version is turned into a full-blown religious extremist, embodying the kind of demagoguery that can emerge in moments of mass fear. Other changes involve tone and pacing. The novella unfolds over several days, allowing the psychological decay of the survivors to slowly take hold. Darabont condensed the timeline, escalating events more quickly to heighten tension and limit downtime. The monsters, too, are more explicitly visualized in the film. While King's prose offers terrifying but often vague glimpses of the creatures, Darabont, working with artists like Jordu Shell and KMB Effects, brought them to life in nightmarish detail, from translucent tentacles and acid-webbing spiders to Lovecraftian titans striding through the mist like eldritch gods. He also made changes for logistical and structural reasons. As a result, several characters are expanded or recontextualized to offer alternate perspectives. Amanda, for example, serves as a more moral and empathetic counterweight to David's pragmatism and Carmody's fanaticism. Characters like Irene Rappler and Dan Miller, while present in the novella, are given more distinct personalities in the film to round out the ensemble and represent different ideological responses to the crisis.
I had you in school, didn't I?
Yes, me and my sister.
Pair of underachievers. After you, Jim.
Even small changes mattered. For instance, the novella supermarket manager, Bud Brown, is a minor presence, while in the film he becomes a petty authority figure clinging to order amid chaos. The dialogue in the film, while often faithful in spirit to the source, is sharper and more confrontational, leaning into the Lord of the Flies descent that occurs once the mist descends and social norms disintegrate. This adaptation strategy defined the tone, grim, grounded, and steeped in realism, despite the fantastical premise. The screenplay focused on tension, human psychology, and breakdown of social order in a confined space, an approach more reminiscent of Sidney Lumet's 12 Angry Men than any typical creature feature. Darabont's dialogue maintained King's small-town cadence, while the beats of escalating panic, fanaticism, and horror were meticulously laid out to reflect both the novella's themes and the director's own vision of apocalyptic parable.
I remember sitting on the set of Nightmare on Elm Street 3 one night and thinking, I'd love to have something in my pocket that I could nurse along and try to get made as a director. And I was weighing The Mist and Shawshank Redemption. The Mist, Shawshank Redemption. And that night I kind of decided Shawshank Redemption. That's a project that I then nursed along for about 5 years and then finally wrote the script and finally made it. And that put me in a whole different sort of perceptive category of what kind of work I do. And it certainly hasn't been a disappointing category to be in, but I've always wanted to reach back and pluck something from my first love, which was horror movies.
With a modest budget of $18 million, far lower than his previous King adaptations, Darabont leaned heavily on trusted collaborators and actors known for their strong, grounded performances over star power. Thomas Jane was cast as David Drayton. At the time, Jane was best known for his work in The Punisher and Deep Blue Sea, and brought a blend of everyman ruggedness and emotional vulnerability. Marcia Gay Harden, an Oscar winner for Pollock, was cast as Mrs. Carmody, the religious zealot who becomes the film's primary human antagonist. Andre Braugher, known for his commanding presence and work on Homicide, Life on the Street, plays Brent Norton, the skeptical neighbor whose arrogance and disbelief lead to one of the earliest casualties.
You wanted to humiliate me some more. Show me a rubber snake while these hicks stand around laughing her asses off.
Laura Holden plays Amanda Dumfries, one of the few characters who stands with David as reason and empathy break down around them. Other casting choices, such as Toby Jones as Ollie Weeks and William Sadler and Jeffrey DeMunn as townsfolk caught in the psychological crossfire, round out a cast that felt authentic.
In this style of filmmaking, we like to shoot 2 cameras at all times. Those cameras have a lot of free reign to shoot any actor at any time. And we can shoot a long scene with several characters a lot faster. Something might take days to shoot. We can get done in a few hours.
You're shooting a master, a close-up, over the shoulder, and blah, 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 blah. You know, there's a certain rhythm to that. But when the camera can be anywhere at any moment, that's different.
The production was structured to allow the actors several weeks of rehearsal before shooting. This was highly unusual, especially for a film with a relatively tight shooting schedule, but it paid dividends in performance. It allowed the cast to build camaraderie and tension before stepping onto the set. As a result, the group dynamics feel real. The arguments, breakdowns, and betrayals carry the weight of real relationships slowly fracturing under stress. This also helped to set the tone for the production, emphasizing naturalism, psychological realism, and intensity. Though the creatures and the mist were key components of the film's horror, Darabont never wanted them to overshadow the human story. His direction focused on the reactions to the horror more than the horror itself. Principal photography began in February of 2007. What unfolded over a mere 37 days was a masterclass in constrained, character-driven filmmaking. With its stripped-down approach, improvisational energy, and emotionally gutting climax, The Mist proved that genre films didn't need to rely on spectacle to leave a lasting impact. But behind the fog of otherworldly creatures and philosophical horror lay a deeply collaborative production effort, one that embraced its budgetary limitations to create something bold, bleak, and enduring. The majority of the movie was filmed on location in Shreveport, Louisiana, with the local area standing in for small-town Maine. Darabont and his production team, including longtime collaborators such as cinematographer Ron Schmidt and production designer Gregory Melton, made the decision to shoot the film in a real, practical supermarket rather than constructing elaborate sets. This approach served 2 purposes. It cut costs significantly and amplified the film's grounded, claustrophobic atmosphere. Filming predominantly took place inside of a former stage department store. This was critical to establishing the film's look and feel. The environment, filled with harsh overhead lighting and industrial rows of food products, became a kind of prison. The fog outside was ever-present and unknowable, but the inside of the store was no sanctuary. It was a crucible, and they wanted the audience to feel just as trapped as the characters. To heighten the realism and performance chemistry, Darabont chose to shoot the film chronologically, an unusual and often expensive decision in filmmaking, but with a contained location and rehearsed ensemble cast, this was possible. The psychological benefits were immense. The characters' escalating paranoia, fractures in trust, and emotional unraveling were mirrored in real time by the actors themselves. Every betrayal, every sacrifice, every death felt earned because it evolved naturally. Adding to the immediacy was Darabont's decision to hire the crew from FX's The Shield to shoot the film. Known for their quick setups, handheld camera work, and gritty documentary-like framing, the team brought a raw aesthetic that contrasted sharply with his more polished work on The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption. Instead of sweeping dollies or cinematic lighting, The Mist utilized shaky, intimate camera work that moved with the characters. Scenes were often lit with fluorescence outside the store, giving the film a flat, washed-out look that emphasized realism and made the supernatural elements even more jarring when they appeared. The creature effects, meanwhile, were a marriage of practical and digital artistry. Legendary effects house K&B FX Group, led by Greg Nicotero, were brought on to design prosthetics, animatronics, and gore effects, while Cafe FX handled the digital side of the monster work. Though some early CGI shots are kind of rough, the overall design and execution of the entities were pretty solid in their creativity. The creatures were never over-explained, and Darabont wisely kept many of them cloaked in fog and shadow, allowing the audience's imagination to fill in the gaps.
When I read The Mist, of course, being a creature monster fanatic when I was a young boy, I always loved the idea of these weird tentacled kind of creatures that were lurking just inside the mist, and you never really saw what they looked like.
Monsters get a little tricky when you put them on film. You know, as we all know, the more you see of them, the less scary they become. And yet, at the same time, Frank is one of those guys who's like, oh, I want to see the monsters. You know, it's bullshit in movies when, you know, they can away and you don't see it. So I think it's something in a lot of ways he's been prepping for 20 years to do.
Post-production was a race against time. With a tight turnaround to hit the Thanksgiving release window in 2007, editor Hunter M. Via had to work quickly to shape the film. The process was meticulous, aiming to preserve the documentary immediacy of the performances while maintaining pacing appropriate for a thriller. The early assembly was well over 2 hours long, but the final cut came in at a lean 126 minutes. Nothing in the film is wasted. The tension is ratcheted up incrementally, with each act tightening the noose around the characters. The score, composed by Mark Isham, was used sparingly, another deliberate choice to emphasize realism. For most of the film, there is no music, only ambient noise, silence, and the hum of a supermarket descending into madness. When music does appear, especially during the heartbreaking climax, Isham uses Arvo Part's Spiegel im Spiegel, a minimalist piece that underscores the devastation with eerie serenity. The director also prepared a black and white version of the film during post-production. This was closer to his original vision, inspired by 1950s creature features like The Thing from Another World and Them. Without color, the film takes on an even more oppressive classic horror tone, and is a bit more forgiving with the special effects. While this version wasn't released theatrically, it was later included in special editions of the home media release, and has become a cult favorite with its stark, moody aesthetic. The final stages of post-production included refining the digital effects, most of which were completed under enormous time constraints. Some sequences, like the scene in the pharmacy overrun by spider-like creatures, required extensive compositing and animation work. While not always technically flawless, they work because the characters' fears and desperation do most of the heavy lifting.
Before we could animate them as CGI, Greg Nicotero's sculptors were creating these things three-dimensionally, because we do some puppet work in the movie as well. It was also terrific for the actors, because it's one thing to say, okay, a big bird is flying over your head, duck. It's another thing to be able to walk in with this thing and say, okay, this is coming right at your face, duck.
The Mist was released in the US on November 21st, 2007, just in time for Thanksgiving. Distributed by Dimension Films, it was marketed as a standard creature feature, which, in hindsight, did it few favors. Many horror fans expected a jump-scare-filled monster mash, only to be confronted with a nihilistic parable about mob mentality and existential dread. But the film grossed $57 million worldwide against its $18 million budget. Not a bomb once you include marketing costs, but far from a breakout hit. Its polarizing ending was a major talking point. Audiences exited theaters either shaken to the core or furious at what they perceived as needless cruelty. The final 5 minutes sparked fierce debate, with many viewers unsure how to process such a brutally bleak conclusion. Critically, however, the film fared far better. Stephen King himself hailed the ending as the most shocking ever added to any of his adaptations, later noting, "I thought that was brilliant. It was so anti-Hollywood, so anti-everything, and it was the ending I never could have written." Over the years, The Mist has developed a cult following, especially among fans who appreciate horror that challenges moral comfort zones. Its uncompromising worldview, sharp performances, and haunting final note have aged well, especially in a post-Walking Dead landscape where survival often comes at a psychological cost. Darabont's work on The Mist also directly influenced his television career. Just a few years later, he would return to the post-apocalyptic genre by developing The Walking Dead for AMC, bringing along many of the same actors and collaborators from The Mist. In many ways, the film became a thematic and aesthetic trial run for the zombie series that would reshape TV horror.
Frank and I have been talking about The Mist for 20 years. When he came to me, he came and asked about Shawshank, but I didn't know that he was thinking about the Mist at the same time. I didn't know, really, that it was a question in his mind, one for the other.
The Mist opens with a storm, but this is no mere meteorological inconvenience. It's the herald of something far worse, a narrative siren blaring that the world is about to crack open. David Drayton, a commercial artist, is introduced amidst the detritus of pop culture. Painted movie posters for Stephen King's The Dark Tower and John Carpenter's The Thing line the walls of his lakeside home. These are portents. The very media David traffics in becomes the metaphorical skin that the film will soon peel back. When the monstrous thunderstorm, described as the most violent electrical event in recorded history, arrives, it leaves more than just downed power lines in its wake. A tree crashes into David's studio window, splintering his art, and, in a symbolic sense, shattering the illusion of normalcy. But it is only after the storm that the true horror begins to seep in. The next morning, as David, his wife Stephanie, and son Billy assess the damage, they spot an eerie phenomenon across the lake, a low-lying mist creeping down from the mountains. At first, it seems innocuous, even beautiful, a slow-moving weather system rolling in like a curtain over the landscape, but there's something wrong with it.
What is it, Daddy?
Two fronts meeting, something like that?
Still operating under the assumption that nature is the only force in play, David decides to head into town for supplies. He brings Billy along, and somewhat begrudgingly his next-door neighbour Brent Norton, a pompous, skeptical lawyer who harbours a long-standing grudge against David over a property dispute.
Are you and Mr. Norton gonna be friends now, Daddy?
Friends might be stretching it a little.
The friction between them, David's pragmatism versus Brent's arrogance, will soon prove more than mere character texture. It becomes a microcosm of the ideological fractures to come. As the trio make their way to the local grocery store, they pass by evidence that the mist is more than just a freak of weather. A convoy of troops barrels in the opposite direction, toward the encroaching fog.
Oh, they're in a hurry.
Maybe their power's out too.
Inside the supermarket, the community is gathered, grumbling over spoiled food, power outages, and the inconvenience of a post-storm cleanup. The power is out, the air still buzzing with tension. But then something stranger happens. Police rushing past draws eyes to the window as the town civil defense sirens begin to blare. That's when Dan Miller stumbles through the sliding doors, bloodied, wide-eyed and gasping for breath. His warning is simple, chilling, and biblical in tone.
Something in the mist! Cook John Lee!
As if on cue, the mist engulfs the parking lot in a dense white shroud. Visibility disappears. A man eager to get home rushes out to his car as people outside do the same, but he and they vanish into the fog, screams trailing behind them. The mist traps its characters in a brightly lit space, a supermarket, that quintessential American symbol of consumer comfort, and forces them to confront the horrors outside and the ones festering within. The store is locked down, exits sealed, and fear sets in like rot. The next to act is a mother, who, having left her 2 young children home alone during the supply run, begs someone to escort her back through the mist. No one volunteers, and so, in a moment that is both heartbreaking and indicting, she walks out alone. The doors close behind her. The silence that follows is more damning than any scream. It's the first act of collective moral failure, and it won't be the last.
Won't somebody here see a lady home? Don't you all want me help?
Ma'am, please.
Each character in this ensemble becomes a thread in the larger net of collective collapse, and it is through their distinct personalities and performances that the film carves its tragic weight. Thomas Jane's David Drayton anchors the story as a practical family man. His defining trait is not heroism in the traditional sense, but leadership born from necessity. He is calm under pressure, rational yet protective, trying desperately to preserve both order and his son's innocence as the world descends into madness.
Daddy, don't go.
No, I'll be gone 2 seconds, big Bill. Come on, get your blanket. I want some idea of what we're up against. I want to know what this mist is.
Standing in moral opposition is Mrs. Carmody, an Old Testament prophetess whose spiritual mania metastasizes into power. Marcia Gay Harden is electrifying. Her portrayal is a slow-burning sermon that builds from comic nuisance to cult leader, weaponizing fear with the precision of a televangelist.
What are you proposing?
That we all prepare to meet our maker.
Ollie Weeks, the assistant manager with a quiet disposition, is the film's MVP. Played with understated charm by Toby Jones, Ollie is the inverse of David, unassuming, physically unimposing, yet shockingly competent and composed when it matters. His surprising courage serves as one of the few moments of hope in a spiraling narrative.
And if you don't shut up, I'll wrap this tape around your mouth. Some target shooting, state champion in '94.
Amanda Dumfries is a maternal and emotional anchor in the chaos. Her relationship with David's son Billy becomes a surrogate family dynamic, and Holden lends Amanda a mixture of resilience and tenderness. She is neither a damsel in distress nor a warrior. Rather, she's a moral compass who insists on decency, even as the social fabric frays.
His only son, to prove his love for God, so enough.
Dan Miller provides a voice of early alarm and later solidarity. His initial warning sets a tone for what's to come, and his steadfast support of David makes him a necessary ally in the moral battlefield of the supermarket. Demand brings a kind of everyman weariness to the role, a deeply American sense of community that roots the film in a recognizable emotional terrain.
We gave it a good shot. Nobody can say we didn't.
Brett Norton is a man of reason who refuses to believe in the supernatural, and his skepticism becomes tragically ironic. Brower delivers a prideful, cerebral performance that captures the dangers of denial as survival instinct.
We are experiencing some kind of disaster, that it's definitely not supernatural.
His character represents the other side of extremism, not blind faith but blind rationalism in a world that no longer plays by rational rules, while Private Jessup is guilt incarnate. His later revelation regarding the Arrowhead Project serves as the film's closest brush with scientific explanation, and Whitwer plays him with a raw, terrified sincerity. He's not a villain, just a pawn in something far bigger. Other supporting players, Irene Repler, the elderly teacher with a bite, Jim Grumden, the mechanic who falls under Carmody's spell, plus Myron, Bud, Ambrose, and others, fill out the spectrum of human response with strong, believable turns. Each embodies a facet of societal collapse.
Don't hit him anymore! Doesn't solve anything! Assholes, you got that kid killed!
In the store, factions begin to form. Rationalism and denial lock horns with fear and dogma. On one side is David, trying to maintain composure and find practical solutions. On the other is Mrs. Carmody, who immediately interprets the mist as divine punishment. To her, the monsters are biblical plagues, and the people around her are potential sacrifices to a wrathful god. She's dismissed as a kook at first, but fear makes people stupid, and eventually it will make them dangerous. David soon experiences the first tangible brush with the otherworldly. While searching for a blanket for Billy in the stock room, he hears something thudding against the loading dock door, something massive and curious. He alerts Ollie and mechanics Myron and Jim, but the pair's skepticism is thicker than the fog. Desperate to keep the generator from flooding the store with fumes, they enlist Norm, a teenage bag boy, to open the bay door for a quick fix.
I'm not convinced that you heard anything. Kid, I'm gonna start the motor, you raise the door, and you yell out when you got enough room.
Out there in the market, they were scared and confused. In here, there's a problem they can solve.
That's when massive barbed tentacles snatch Norm and tear him to pieces before pulling him away. It's violent, alien, and completely unexpected in how unceremoniously it plays out. They slam the door shut and the others stand there in shock, struggling to process what they've seen as their denial evaporates. The reality then sinks in. They are not just trapped by fog, they are surrounded by creatures from a realm not meant for human eyes.
Jesus Christ. I'm sorry about the kid.
The unsettling new status quo, the danger outside and the growing instability within, sparks a spectrum of reactions among the store's patrons, ranging from disbelief to full-blown apocalyptic hysteria. Brett Norton, ever the skeptic, stubbornly clings to rationalism despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Meanwhile, Mrs. Carmody, the store's self-appointed prophet of doom, sees the chaos not as aberrations but affirmation. The end times are here, and she is their messenger.
Help these people. Some can be saved, can't they?
Once it becomes clear that whatever is lurking outside has no intention of simply going away, David, Ollie, and a few others take initiative. They begin barricading the front windows with bags of soil, dog food, and whatever else they can find, and tape the cracked glass to delay its inevitable shattering. But not everyone is on board. Norton, along with a handful of people who still believe there is nothing supernatural about the mist, decide to leave the following day. It's the kind of denial that feels tragically familiar. When faced with overwhelming evidence, some people would choose to believe in their own infallibility right up until the moment it kills them.
Can't convince some people there's a fire even when their hair is burning.
A biker also decides to make the trek to a nearby truck to grab a shotgun. To track his progress, they rig a 300-foot clothesline to his waist. Roughly 200 feet out, the rope goes taut, then lifts, then jerks with sickening force. Screams then echo from the mist, and the rope goes limp. What they pull back is not salvation, but confirmation. The biker's lower half, ragged and bloodied, is all that remains. The emotional gravity of this moment causes the store to buckle. The whispers of fear become sobs, and those sobs become prayers, and with prayer comes Mrs. Carmody. With every passing minute, her ramblings sound less like madness and more like divine wisdom to the desperate. The incident gives her fire oxygen, and she uses it to burn down any competing ideology.
Do you see? Now do you believe?
Night falls like a curtain, but there is no peace in the dark. From the mist come new horrors, flying creatures that crash into the supermarket's torch-lit sanctuary. The initial wave consists of venomous scorpion flies, which land on the windows like bloated locusts. But then come their predators, the terror buzzards that break through the glass in pursuit of their prey. The attacks are swift and vicious. Tom and Sally, the latter having just shared a brief romance with Private Jessup, are killed, while Joe Eagleton is left with severe burns. The fight to repel the invaders is chaotic and desperate, but ultimately, David and Ollie manage to kill the creatures that made it inside, the latter using a gun given to him by Amanda. It's important to note that during the chaos, a scorpion fly lands on Mrs. Carmody, but it doesn't attack and simply flies away. This is divine providence in the eyes of a growing congregation. The panicked and irrational now have evidence, and Carmody seizes it like a sword. She is no longer just a lunatic shouting about revelation, she is chosen by God. As such, her influence grows exponentially overnight. Patrons, once skeptical, now kneel before her, looking for guidance. Carmody's theology of blood sacrifice becomes the default logic of the terrified. The blood of the innocent shall cleanse the earth, she says, and people start to believe her.
You scare people badly enough. I'll turn to whoever promises a solution.
Meanwhile, Amanda finds that her friend called Harriet that had been looking after Billy had taken her own life. Yet another crack in the store's crumbling sanity. But it's a more personal moment that hits hardest. Billy, wide-eyed and solemn, begs his father to promise that he will never let the monsters take him. David, importantly, makes a vow, but it's one that's going to break him by the end. At this point, David begins to grasp the threats surrounding them, the Lovecraftian horrors in the mist and the escalating zealotry inside. And so, driven by desperation, he organizes a small group to retrieve medical supplies from the pharmacy next door for Joe. The goal is simple: help the burn victim and test the feasibility of escape.
What are we looking for?
Very strong antibiotics.
The group, comprising Ollie Weeks, the jittery but still functional Jim, Irene Repler, the stoic Dan Miller, Bobby Eagleton, Mike Hatlin, and Private Jessup, set out. But what they encounter is a biology lesson from hell. The pharmacy has become a tomb, webbed in silk, filled with the decaying corpses of soldiers and shoppers alike, used as hosts for Grey Widowers. The battle is short and traumatic. Bobby and Mike die gruesome deaths in the skirmish, torn apart or sprayed with caustic threads. The rest, David, Ollie, Dan, Jim, Irene, and Jessup, manage to escape, only to find that Joe Eagleton would die anyway. This sequence widens the scope, suggesting that what lies beyond the mist is not just a handful of species, but an entire ecosystem, a thriving biosphere of abominations that shouldn't exist. Mrs. Carmody, standing like some dollar store Joan of Arc, sees in this failed expedition her divine confirmation. The mist has punished the faithless, spared the devout, and as far as she's concerned, it's time to feed the mist what it demands. Her power swells, her congregation growing fat with fear. Among her newest converts, a visibly rattled Jim, now spiritually gut-punched and mentally adrift, with Carmody offering the oldest of religious bargains, obedience in exchange for survival.
Boy hasn't been right since the pharmacy. His mind's just snapped.
The survivors divide like tectonic plates under pressure. David's group, clinging to a shrapnel of reason, now represent a minority. Carmody's congregation has ballooned into a devout army of zealots, ready to stone sinners and slaughter lambs. A third group, detached and paralyzed, drift quietly in the middle, choosing inaction over allegiance. But inaction is simply delayed surrender.
I'd rather die out there trying than in here waiting.
Then comes the revelation that blows the lid off the existential horror. The two hanged soldiers found in the storeroom weren't just casualties, they were participants in something far more significant. With their deaths revealed, the focus turns to Private Jessup, the last surviving member of the military trio. Jessup, cornered and terrified, finally breaks. The rumors were true. The Arrowhead Project, a top-secret government experiment rumored to have pierced the veil between dimensions, is likely the cause of the mist.
Well, maybe your window turned out to be a door, didn't it?
Jessup's confession that they opened a door but something came through does more than explain the tentacles and wings and fangs. It contextualizes the horror. This isn't just nature gone rogue, this is mankind's reckless ambition bearing terrible fruit. The mist isn't natural, it's otherworldly, and worse, it's our fault. Jim, now firmly among the Carmody faithful, sees the soldier's guilt as divine confirmation. He alerts the congregation and Jessup becomes the scapegoat, a literal sacrificial lamb, and Carmody calls for his death.
And it is his fault, yes,
No!
it is your
No! It is not my fault!
What follows is one of the film's most chilling scenes. Jessup is dragged out, beaten, stabbed, and thrown into the mist like meat to the wolves. The act is swift and brutal, culminating in his body being plucked away by an enormous mantis-like creature. At this stage, the story isn't just a siege, it's a psychological disintegration. What began as a monster movie has morphed into something far darker, a philosophical autopsy of humanity under pressure. The monsters outside are terrifying, but they're known. They act on instinct. The people inside the store, however, are acting on belief, and that's infinitely more dangerous. This leads David, Ollie, Amanda, Irene, Dan, Bud, Myron, Ambrose, and Billy to make their move to escape, but Carmody blocks their path like a figurehead of divine judgment. In a chilling display of righteousness, she declares that God demands a sacrifice. First Billy, then Amanda. This moment is critical because it reveals how far the human mind can twist. For Carmody's flock, this isn't murder, it's divine necessity. But just as the mob begins to advance, reality snaps back in the most brutal, matter-of-fact way imaginable. Ollie steps forward and shoots Mrs. Carmody dead. In that instant, the spell is broken. Carmody's followers, so sure of their crusade, watch their prophet crumble like any mortal woman. David's group then pushed past the stunned congregation and into the mist. As they race toward David's Land Cruiser, the creatures emerge and fall. Ollie, having just saved them, meets a sudden, horrific end, ripped apart by an arachne lobster. Bud Brown panics and bolts back inside, sealing his own cowardly fate, while Myron and Ambrose are snatched by the Grey Widowers. Survival, as the film has made painfully clear, is not guaranteed to the brave or the good. David retrieves the revolver and drives them through the ruins of Bridgton. Every mile they cover reveals the scale of the disaster. The mist has transformed familiar landscapes into silent graveyards. Houses stand in eerie stillness, their windows shattered, their walls scored with claw marks. Vehicles sit abandoned, their owners long devoured or fled. When they finally reach David's home, the truth lands with devastating simplicity. His wife Stephanie, whom he promised to return to, has fallen victim to the Grey Widowers, and David's heart breaks. The mission to survive, to escape, to find something beyond this nightmare suddenly feels hollow. The group drives south in silence, past empty highways and broken towns, beneath the unseen terror pressing against the fog. At one point, they witness something vast, a tentacled colossus lumbering through the mist, a living monument to their insignificance called the Behemoth. It's a moment that underscores the film's bleak philosophy. Humans are not at war with these creatures, they are irrelevant to them. Humanity is merely caught in the crossfire of an incomprehensible ecosystem. Eventually, the car sputters and dies, and there are no survivors or signs of help anywhere. And so, the group confronts the belief that this is the end of the road. Amanda, Dan, and Irene quietly accept what's coming. This is the moment where the mist abandons any pretense of comfort. David, the man who spent the entire film fighting, planning, promising, now does the unthinkable to keep his promise to his son. He shoots Billy, Amanda, Dan, and Irene, using the 4 remaining bullets to spare them the agony of being torn apart by creatures.
Got 4.
There's 5 of us.
I'll figure something out.
Now, I need to point out that David's impulsivity was often counteracted by Ollie's calm pushback, but without him as a pillar of cool-headedness, the group have gone awry. Then comes the most brutal irony. David steps out of the car, screaming at the mist, daring the monsters to take him. But instead of mandibles or tentacles, he's met with headlights. The mist begins to part and a tank rolls toward him. Then soldiers and trucks filled with survivors. And that's when David sees the woman from the supermarket at the start who begs for someone to escort her home. The woman that no one helped is alive, her 2 children safe in the back of a rescue truck. She found safety by overcoming her fear, while David had surrendered to it.
Man, please. Got my own boy to worry about.
Realization hits like a sledgehammer. His act of mercy was unnecessary. His son is dead, 3 others are dead, and he's alive to bear it. David falls to his knees in the middle of the road, howling in anguish, a guttural, animalistic scream that cuts deeper than any creature attack in the film. This is the true terror of the mist. Not the monsters, not the cult, but the unbearable weight of choices made. Choices forged in fear, grief, and hopelessness. The Mist is a rare breed of horror film, one that wields dread like a scalpel and strips human nature to the bone. Its greatness lies in its unflinching portrayal of people when civilization collapses, elevating a straightforward survival narrative into an existential nightmare, masterfully blending cosmic horror with psychological drama. At its core, it's a pressure cooker of escalating fear. The titular mist crawling over the sleepy town cloaks a menagerie of interdimensional creatures that seem torn from Lovecraft's most unhinged dreams. But the real terror blooms inside the supermarket, where belief and support systems fracture, paranoia festers, and a new theocracy emerges under the guidance of Mrs. Carmody. The film also thrives on moral ambiguity. There are no clear heroes, only people clinging to whatever they think might keep them alive. Rationalism, religion, or blind hope. The creatures are disturbing in both form and implication, but Darabont's real triumph is tone. There's no comic relief, no moral safety net, and the despair is total. Ultimately, the film is not about survival, it's about the cost of survival, and what happens when hope runs out. That's what makes it great. It stares into the abyss and finds us staring back.
You don't have much faith in humanity, do you?
None whatsoever.
As a species, we're fundamentally insane.
I can't accept that. Where do you think you're going, Mr. David Drayton? Are you so anxious to make your boy an orphan?
Shut up, you miserable buzzard!